I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to Great Rally Book Study.
And my name is Howard Eber. I am also a recovered alcoholic. Welcome.
All right. So this book study's been really flying the last few weeks. We got in some deep-hearted discussion and this week will be a lot of information to take in. Um, so we're on page 60. And we did the ABCs last week. And right after the ABCs, you heard us, you know, you don't hear this read at meetings. I wish they would read this instead of the end what God could have what if you were saw it. But it says, well, first of all, it says being convinced. And if you read the original manuscript of the ABC, at the ABCs, it says being convinced. If you're not convinced of these three vital issues, either reread the book or throw it away. And here it says being convinced. So he wants us to be certain of those three vital issues. And he says, once you're convinced, we're at step 3, which is decide to turn our will and our lives over to God as we understood him. So I'm going to put up my slide here and I think we should see this. So it says, this is the formal written step, made a decision to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understood him. So, you know, here, step 3 is a very misunderstood step. So it's easy to get very, well, let's say misled. Some say they're stuck on 3. I'm going to break down 3 to 5 components just like this. And the first one will state, made a decision. So made a decision, the main reason step 3 is so misunderstood because people see the word God in there, right? And they believe step 3 is where, we turn our will and life over to God. And, some even say you must have God in order to do step 3. And people, sit on step 3 because they're trying to figure out what this God thing is. And that is why so many, I guess, get stuck there. So if you could turn your will life over to care of God in step 3, we would have a 3-step program. We wouldn't be meeting here on Thursday nights and we'd be having fun somewhere else. But in this book would be 63 pages long. So, but it says made a decision to turn will life over to care of God as understood him. So what's a decision? And a decision, in the simplest terms I could say, is a key part of our human thought process. It's just a key part of it. And where we analyze a situation of uncertainty, gather facts, so we know what course of action to take. It's I guess you call it a pre-thought plan prior to taking action. You hear the 3 frogs in the log analogy all the time, and there's 3 frogs in a log. One makes a decision, jump off. How many are left in the log? There's still 3. But the most important component of a decision is action. Howard, do you want to comment on the word decision?
No, the only thing I do want to add is for the record, the original manuscript, the wording of the step was made a decision to turn our will and made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care and direction. There was a word that was removed, those 2 words, and direction. And Bill is cunning and baffling also because while he agreed to remove it from the step, in the narrative that Steve just read and we're about to read today, he put it back in there. So in the step, he removed it. In the narrative, he added it because from this point on, he doesn't have to answer to anybody for what goes into the book. He made some deals originally. We talked about that a few weeks ago, and that was one of them. That's all.
So the main component of this decision is action, and that's why so many people get confused. Is step 3 is a decision, to turn their lives or to care of God. Again, action is the key, and the decision, you know, if I'm going to my son's award ceremony after this tonight, you know, that does not I'm magically transmit me over to the award ceremony. I got to get my, get change the clothes, get my car, and drive myself there. Making a decision, I'm still sitting here. So step three is, I don't like to say it's just a decision, but it's a decision to turn one's life over to the care of God. And how do we do that? Well, the second, the pen is to paper, and four, as soon as that happens, when a person decides to turn their life over to care of God, um, we must take the action. In step three sounded a lot more harder than it was until you get there. But when it's all up in your head, it sounds, so until we act on that decision, all we have is a decision. So the next one is to turn. Turn means a good way to, you could, it's, I don't like to say it's, people act like it's, at this, you could say it's a transfer of control, but, it's really, it's a shift in the opposite direction. We often hear people say, like, oh, I lost in a meeting, I lost my job. I just need to turn over. I'm getting divorced. I just need to turn over. This is way more than turning a single situation over. This is about like almost like a transfer of ownership. We're turning our will and life over, not a single situation. Howard, do you want to comment on that at all?
No, I just, this whole thing, step three to me is like a contract. In a legal contract, you have the first page, which states the principles, the basic outline of the contract, and you sign it at the bottom of the contract. And step three to me is like the face of the contract. Every page after this, all the steps after this are like the parts of the contract that have to be initialed after you complete it. You have to initial that next part of the contract. But the heart, the intention of the contract is right here. It's laid out in that third step. And the rest of it that follows is just the execution of it, so that by the time we get to the ninth step, we will have effectively turned our will, our thoughts, and our actions over to the care of God. Because in this step, as Steve mentioned, all we are doing is making a decision. And the decision has action, as Steve said. That's all.
It's like how many of us has made a decision. I mean, I lost the third steps where I would go home and go, what happened? Nothing happened, But the next, the third part is our will in our life. And our will is our thinking, and our life is our actions. So, what are we inventorying in inventory? I mean, we're inventorying our thinking, our resentments, fears, and our actions, harm, sex conduct, and so forth. And so we're making a decision to turn our thinking and actions over to the care of God. You know, um, or as one guy used to say, we're turning our thinking and actions over to the care of the steps. And you know, I had told my sponsor, I said, I don't know if I can think about turning my whole life to care of God. And he told me, well, you turn your life to care of God, it's the right step four. And I go, okay, I'm going to turn my whole life over to care of step four. And he goes, whatever you want to do. and I had a spiritual experience within that step. So over to the care of God. Care means, if think about it, if you drawing a picture and you take really good care how you draw it. You're going to take your time, right? But then if you take care of something that is fragile, you comfort, you hold it close to you. I look at this as the same thing, but I look at it's kind of like a caretaker, right? Think about a caretaker. When my grandma was sick, um, we had to find someone that was competent, trustworthy, available, loving, able to care for her life, and do for her what she couldn't do for herself anymore. Now, that's why I look at the same aspect. We're, you know, we're asking God to do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. So you put God in as a caretaker and it goes endless. I mean, the aspect of it, um, God becomes the caretaker of our thinking and actions. And it sounds easier said than done, right? But the next one is as we understood him. And this is, you could say your own conception. Well, understand is your comprehension of something, you know, and in our case, our, comprehension of God. God is as you understand him, or you don't understand him, and you can look at it as your personal conception of God rather than another person's. Your own personal comprehension, understanding, no matter how limited it is. I don't recommend the doorknob and all that stuff, and when you take that action, you know, the more you understand. Howard, you want to give a little history on the God as you understand him? Yeah, maybe he's muted. Are you there, Howard?
Sorry, I had it muted.
That's okay.
Very often the credit is given to Ebby Thatcher for coming up with that idea out of frustration when he was sitting at the kitchen table with Bill. But we've since found out that that is very much from the mind of Bill Wilson and not the mouth of Ebby Thatcher, that Ebby was given credit for that by Bill, but it actually was Bill's idea. And it makes sense that it be Bill's idea because that's the way Bill Wilson was raised. His grandfather, who raised him, was a very spiritual man, but he was not a very religious man. He deeply resented the religions of the world telling him how to worship and what to worship. And that was passed along to Bill. So he very much was raised with this concept of God as he understood him. And the other part of it is that sometimes people give credit to Jim Burwell, that he came up with the idea of God as we understand him. Well, no, he had suggested some of the wording that went into the step, but the concept, the idea of God as we understand him or as you understand him was purely Bill Wilson's. Some of the wording was suggested by Jim Burwell, granted, but the concept, the idea was not Ebby Thatcher, was not Jim Burwell, was maybe even not Bill Wilson. It was maybe Gardner Griffith, his grandfather, but it was very definitely Bill Wilson. And you were talking a moment ago, too, about a resolution and a decision. We heard in the doctor's opinion, that many a resolution, never a decision. Well, what's the difference? Well, a resolution is an intention to do something. A decision is a judgment to do something that is followed by action. There's a difference. A decision involves action, a resolution, just words, an intention. I don't know if that was related to that or not, but I felt like it was.
All right. Um, so, I mean, like Howard said, it's like a contract, maybe a declaration or, but the good way to put it is, step one's the diagnosis, step two's the prescriptions, step three, I make the decision to follow the various things prescribed. And step four, I start taking those, that prescription, you know, I always tell people this. I don't like to, I'm not one that's gonna, give people definite stuff or anything like that. But if when a person goes ahead and does 4 through 9, somewhere within that, they will find something, and they will find some type of change within them. They will experience whatever, they turn their life over to. Maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's something deeper than that. But you will experience also the promises, and you will experience change, entire psychic change. So let's go back to page 60. And this is where the book is going to completely shift from drinking to spiritual. From this point on, it's all about personality change and spiritual awakening, bring about recovery. And this is something I read years ago, and he's got the word convinced there again. But I was like, what's this? No, like we almost want to pretend you understand what he's saying. The first requirement is to be convinced that any life run self-will could hardly be a success. And I guess the question is, you know, what is success? I mean, some people think, oh, it's, making lots of money, or, buying that fancy car, or looking good, or, you know, success means to achieve a goal, whatever it is. And, but what the question is, it says any life runs could hardly be a success. So what's the opposite of success? Would be failure, right? Which means to not achieve a goal, to not achieve where I want to be. He's nicely saying any life run on self-will result in failure. Let's go back to 52 really quick. And I'm going to read this back. And first time someone did this at a book study, I thought it was kind of harsh, but it makes sense if what the points we're trying to get across. So think of any life run on self-will can result in failure. So if you read these bedevilments again, it says we're having trouble with personal relationships, failure. We couldn't control emotional natures, failure. We are prey to misery and depression, failure. We couldn't make a living, failure. We had the feeling of uselessness, failure. We were full of fear, failure. We were unhappy, failure. We couldn't seem to help other people, failure. Now, the thing about failure is people sit there and, I had a book study one night. Some guy goes, "You're calling me a failure?" No, I said, no. I said, what would did you have a goal to have good personal relations? Did you have a goal to control your emotional natures? Did you have a goal to not be prey to misery and depression? Did you have a goal to make a living? Did you have a goal to feel useful? Do you have a goal? It's our goals. Howard, do you want to comment on that little thing, or you got to unmute yourself?
Keep forgetting that. What I wanted to comment on is the way you started out this section. You had mentioned the word convinced. And after we went through A, B, and C, Bill tells us being convinced of those things, being convinced of step 1 and step 2, we are now at step 3. We're like at the door, we're knocking on the door. And then he says in the next paragraph, what Steve just read is the first requirement is we be convinced of something. What is it we're being convinced of? That any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Well, what does that mean? And I'm going to take a minute to show you something that to me drives home the point of a life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Let me put this up here. Thoughts and actions. When we make decisions based on self-will, and again, a life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So when we make decisions based on self, what's in it for me? What do I get out of it? Why should I do it? What happens? We're in collision with everybody and everything. We're in conflict spiritually, mentally, physically. And what happens when you're in collision and in conflict? You step on the toes of the people around you. You collide with them because you're in conflict with them. And what do? They retaliate. They push back. And when they push back, what do? We push back. We get angry. We get fearful. We act in a harmful manner. In other words, we get resentful. And when I'm resentful, I drink and I drug. So the connection between drinking and drugging is the action I want to eliminate from my life. I can't eliminate the action without finding what is the thought that set it in motion, because all action is generated by thought. I hear people in meetings every once in a while say that I'm going to act my way into good thinking. Sorry, that's incorrect. Even if you say I'm going to act my way into good thinking, you've thought of it. It always starts with a thought. So if we're going to eliminate the action of drinking and drugging, we got to get down to what are those 100 forms of fear and self that start this chain of act in motion. And that's those self-centered thoughts that we just started to talk about. The self-centered thoughts that generate our life can hardly be considered a success. Why? Because they always end up in our drinking and drugging, which is what this is all about. Thanks, Steve.
I like that. That's good stuff. Um, so I mean, these failures, this stuff, well, I mean, what causes this? I mean, why do we get upset so easy? Why do we blame others? Why do I get angry? Why do I have resentments? Why do I criticize? Why do I pick others apart, including myself? You know, why do I fear so much what other people might find out? You know, or go seek revenge, or get stuck in the past, or be grieving and or guilt or greedy. You know, why are we like this? Why do we get judgmental? And, or at best, why do we have to be right all the time or get the last word in? Most important, why do I hold on to things for so long? See, here's the thing: is the average person, most likely will never know why they go from fear to anger to resentment to fear to harming others to fear to guilt to fear to self-pity and depression over and over and over again. I was there. But I didn't even see where this stuff I was approaching, and I never even, I never even, I had no idea where it originated from, and I never, knew what drove my anger like a river. I never knew it, and I didn't go to AA going, I'm going to find out why I'm so angry now. But I had no idea, why fear took away my graceful thinking when I wanted it. But it, I would think, well, maybe it's the way I raised. No. And how about the belief system I had? No. Well, maybe it's selfishness. No. What I'm talking about, this self-will runs way deeper than all those things combined. Matter of fact, I believe from my personal experience that selfishness and our belief system are driven by the exact same thing. What drives us. And that, the answer lies deep inside all of us. Any life with broad self-will. Self-will, this is my definition, is my unconscious devotion to my own social, security, and sex needs for survival. Self-wills are misdirected instincts. And misdirected means led in the wrong direction. Also refer to the big book as simply self in certain points. Um, and you see it in I'm going to share this really quick. Now, this is my inventory sheet. So they look, some of you have seen them before, and some of you haven't, but I'm going to give you a quick glance. I'm not going to explain them to you right now, but this is the third column right here. And you see, personal relations, pride, emotional security, blah, blah, blah. That's what that looks like. And, some people, but we see, we're born with them. And that's the thing. And to get Joe and Charlie did a great job with this and bringing the big book and the 12 and 12 together at points. And I'm going to go to page 42 of the 12 and 12. And on page 42, I'll give you guys a minute to get there. Even though it's on step 4, we're in step 3. Why are we looking at the third column of the inventory on step 3? Because we're preparing ourselves, we're talking about our will, our thinking, but self-thinking, right? So page 42 to 12 and 12 says, creation, God, gave us things for a purpose, which means I guess they're saying they're God-given. Without them, we wouldn't be complete human beings. If men and women did not exert themselves to be secure in their persons, made no effort to harvest food or construct shelter, there'd be no survival. If they didn't reproduce, the earth wouldn't be populated. This is all kind of common sense, right? If there was no social instinct, if men cared nothing for society or one another, there would be no society. So these desires for sex relations, for material and emotional security, and for companionship are perfectly necessary, right, and surely God-given. So all that's proper use of our instincts right there. I'm gonna go build a house. I'm gonna go bring food to the home. I'm gonna, go and, do whatever I do, have kids. Now look at this part. Yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, often far exceed their proper function. Powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, they drive us, dominate us, and insist upon ruling our lives. Our desires for sex, for material and emotional security, for an important place in society, often tyrannizes. Tyrannus is an old word. It means to rule over, with power or something. Like it's like a tyrant boss abuses control, right? When thus out of joint, man's natural desires cause him great trouble. Practically all the trouble there is. No human being, however good, is exempt from these troubles. That means exempt means free from these troubles. Nearly every this is the part double underline. Nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instincts. What happens? Our great national assets, the instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. Howard, you want to comment on that tidbit there?
I get to this section that you're reading, I always point out when we get to the actual grid on the fourth step, we have the first column, which is who are we angry at? The second column is what did they do to deserve a special place in hell? And the third column is what basic instinct of ours, what God-given survival mechanism of ours was hurt or threatened by what that person did. You see, I can't be angry at you if you didn't do something that threatened or hurt one of my basic instincts. You stepped on one of my toes. What toe was it? Was it the toe of pride? Was it the toe of self-esteem? Was it the security toe? And security is physical security, emotional security, and financial security. Was it the relationships toe? Relationships are two parts: personal, which is friends, relatives, co-workers, neighbors, and so on, or sexual relationships, self-explanatory what that is about. Or did you step on my toe of, and here's the big one, ambition? You interfered with my plans. I got a book that tells me how things are supposed to be done, and you're not following that. You interfered with my ambition. So what basic instinct was hurt or threatened? And the reason why I point out this particular section, these 3 pages, is Bill does such a magnificent job of explaining to us what do we mean by basic instincts of life, that they get out of proportion. So I one of my basic instincts is hurt or threatened, and it's because it's hypersensitized by what you did. You acted out and hurt me because one of your basic instincts was out of proportion. Perhaps you stole from me, so your sense of financial security was out of whack. Whatever motivated you to hurt me is your basic instinct being out of proportion. And the way I responded is because my basic instinct was hypersensitized by what you did. I hope that makes sense, but that's what these pages teach me, is about them being out of proportion and hypersensitized.
Love it. I'm going to read a little short tidbit from Bill Wilson. It says letter 1954, but I saw this years ago and it just caught my eye. The idea keeps persisting that the instincts are primarily bad and are roadblocks before which all spirituality falters. I believe the difference between good and evil is not the difference between spiritual and instinctual man. It is a difference between proper and improper use of the instincts. Recognition and right channeling of the instincts is the essence of achieving wholeness. Wow. So he's saying right channeling of the instincts to understand and seeing what here's, I get a resentment towards someone. Oh, it is my pride. And it's just bam, you know. So these instincts, they drive our theories, our beliefs, our thinking. but misuse, I mean, they erupt and they disturb everyday activities. Now, do you have to be an alcoholic to have misdirected instincts? Absolutely not. We can look around, go outside and look around, you know, but tie an out physical allergy to alcohol and obsession with misdirected instincts, and the instincts get worse and worse and worse because they're not doing anything with them. But so misdirected instincts are natural, which to serve us, you know, and it becomes distorted, and they create like everything there is. But you can, I know I couldn't go spiritually until I was aware of what these were, and I could do an 18-hour seminar on them. But if you never done the steps, you're not gonna have it's gonna be confusing. You have to experience this. So to truly understand, this is, let me put up this instincts chart, and I put this in the 4-step packet I did years ago. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna see if I can actually pull this off. Zoom this up a little bit so we can zoom on Zoom, right? Um, we're gonna look at the social instinct, which is interaction with others and yourself. That's just the social. So there's 3 S's: social, security, sex. And but our social is, I'm gonna interact with people. It's my natural desire for pride, for self-esteem, for personal relationships. So social instinct could be concern for one another, but it's a natural we all have. And human beings, um, and animals, we both share similar security and sex instincts. Where we differ is, we interact in a social setting. Animals do not interact in a social setting. They don't have self-esteem, they don't have pride, you know, they differ from us there. So what is pride? Pride is my view how others see me, right? What others think of me. So some call, some my grandparents used to call it fear of what others think of us. Concern about others' opinions and judgment, but it creates this front. It's why we wear a mask. It's why we hide behind things. Sets personal growth. So when misdirected, and this is what I'm going to do each one. I'm going to explain what they are and explain what happens when they're misdirected. So when misdirected, pride leads to, so we fear what others think of us. We turn our lives over to others. We're afraid people will see who we really are, know the truth about us, right? We fear being rejected. We fear being recognized. We fear we can't run the whole show, or we overseek approval. We disregard the needs of others, and we care about is our own, and we lose sight of our goals by trying to demand correct responses from people. What happens? We become dishonest, and we overuse lies only we believe, and the end result is we're restless, irritable, and discontent. And I'm going to run through the rest of these real quick, and then I'm going to have Howard talk about this whole social part. But about I got self-esteem on here as high and low, and that's not the way I have it in the 4-step. I have people identify what it is, but criticism doesn't it doesn't have to come from other people. It can come from us. And it's it's the evaluation of self. Self-esteem is affected. It creates a high point called high self-esteem, and that's why I view myself as better than other people. It's sense of superiority, arrogance, high self-worth, narcissistic, egotistical. We're constantly judging others. We're constantly, trying to get, control. And if I'm mad at Howard, my self-esteem might be high. I'm better than him. What does he know? Blah, blah, blah. That's the mindset of high self-esteem. Can you have high self-esteem mindset without having resentment? Yeah, a lot of us had that. I've caught myself having it at meetings before. Here comes this person again. And I found myself going, man, what am I doing? And by years, it took me a few years of doing, continuous inventory. That's saying the only person I'm really defining is myself. But when self-esteem is affected, it can also create a low point. Low self, I view myself as less than others, feeling of worthlessness, that we are not as good as others. We have self-doubt. We're constantly questioning our abilities, focusing on our flaws, our own mistakes, self-criticism, critical towards yourself. Example, the same thing. I might have a resentment against Howard, right? He said something critical about me and hurt my feelings. Now I don't think I'm good enough. I feel less than. Maybe you can get depressed over it. So when either one of these directed high or low, what happens when misdirected? Our mood is going where? Up and down, up and down. And we run over to satisfy those needs. We feel others are always judging us. We compete. And we believe we're better than others in the high aspect, or our way is the only way. And we get angry when people don't do it our way. And when we might even go out and seek revenge. We have to be right all the time. Or we think we're less than others, constantly comparing ourselves with no confidence, not good enough, failure, like we read earlier. And we become, sad, angry. And the end result is we are either going to seek to be the center of attention or we're going to isolate. Either way is going to cause some type of depression. And what's the way out of this? Self-esteem. But I mean, once we do inventory, what's the way? I mean, the work on, is to look at the word esteem means to hold a person in high regard. You have to find that yourself first. But to get rid of low self-esteem, we got to do esteemable acts. Until we start doing good, we'll never believe we're good. That was my story. So esteemable act could be holding the door for someone, or bringing them food, being a good, Samaritan. But those things are great. But the ultimate esteemable act we can do is what? Sponsorship, right? Sponsorship. So the last one in the social setting is going to be personal relationships. It's our DNA. It's our program. It's our network of people. Personal, our inner circle of support. We need personal relationships in our lives. It's through that. But what happens when it's misdirected? We make demands on others. We expect others to do for us. We get resentful when others don't do what we want, right? We always try to please others, losing our own goals. And we blame others for what? Our problems. I mean, we resent them. We get envious, jealous. We're again competing. We harm others, drive people out of our lives. And the result is we isolate and we become lonely. That's not the way our social network is supposed to work. It's not. Howard, did you want to comment on those social aspects that I mentioned?
Um, well, the only thing I want to point out, first of all, do you have a copy of this with the bottom not cut off? First thing.
Oh, I'm this. I can shrink it down a little bit.
Oh, yeah, and can you
I
put
didn't
a
really
copy,
do.
maybe a PDF link in the chat?
Yes, I will.
Okay, I've got a couple of people who have reached out to me and asked for that. So if you could put that in the chat, it would be helpful.
Absolutely.
I guess a summary is in the 12 and 12, Bill says, towards the end of page 44, he says that instincts run wild in themselves. Alcoholics, especially, should be able to see that instincts run wild in themselves is the underlying cause of our destructive thinking. This perverse soul sickness is not pleasant to look at, and instincts on rampage balk at investigation. Balk just means resist. That this comes down to this is the root of our problems. Bill says selfish, self-centeredness. This, we believe, is the root of our problems. Steve, can I put up a quick share?
Yeah, let me stop
Take
this
that
one real
down real
quick.
quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, Here's a picture of a tree. and the roots underneath it. The roots feed the tree. The tree stays alive because of the roots. Our selfish, self-centered thoughts, those thoughts of what's in it for me? Why should I do it? What do I get out of it? Those are the thoughts that feed. Think of the tree as our disease, as our alcoholism. And the roots are our manifest, those 100 forms of fear and self that feed our disease. So the tree is the disease, the roots are our manifestations of self that have fed our disease all along. So it may not have it to do with the social instinct, but I just wanted to summarize it on that before we ran out of time.
No, it's great. Um, so we're gonna go over to security. And I remember, being a kid running around at the school, and I stole a burglar, the burglar alarm fell to the ground, and I took the case home from it, and it said security, the feeling of being safe and protected. Security is being safe from danger. And what makes human beings, want to be safe and protected? It's a natural fear called security for all human beings. So emotional security is stability with ourselves and others. Emotions are strong response to obviously our strong response to instinct. We all experience, love, fear, joy, sadness, anger, resentment, guilt, stuff like that. But we want our emotions secure and calm and serene. Emotional security is the measure of the emotional state. To feel safe and grounded in our emotions. And step four, we're talking about emotional security. When's it not affected in a resentment? You know what I mean? It's like, but when misdirected, the most common symptom of emotional security is one of them is self-pity. And that's the reoccurring presence of the pleasure towards ourself. And anxiety is the feeling of fear and worry and uselessness. When we become emotionally insecure, a feeling of uneasiness. We get angry and have defensive actions. And the end result is depression, which is this feeling of low mood that causes a person to feel helpless, hopeless, and overwhelmed at daily activities. A guy told me a definition of depression years ago that I love. It's when your life doesn't match your blueprint and you think you're powerless to change it. And that's what happens when this is misdirected, our emotional security. We just go, oh, and why did fear, fear is all over this. What did fear do to our emotional security? From a harm standpoint, we've robbed people of their emotional security who love this. Like my mom, she always wondered if I was alive or dead. And I'm going to move on to material security. And material security is having stability in a reliable source necessary for, a comfortable, secure life. Financial security, to have, we need a secure job. We need, to put a roof over our head. We need things like shelter, food, employment, all that stuff. The material security can propel you to go get a job, make money. But, how about when it's misdirected? Now it gets crazy. We believe we need more things. We prioritize material possession over our wealth or even our spiritual, right? We run over others to what? Get what we need. And we fear we never have enough. Financial stress, think of that, financial anxiety. The fears of losing our job and all that stuff. It's tough in this day and age. But we pursue beyond what we have. We drive ourselves beyond our needs. We take down other people with us. We become dishonest. And we resent and harm others who, in the way of our material needs, but the end result is we're unhappy, dissatisfied, unfulfilled, difficulty finding our purpose in life. One thing I love about doing book studies with other people is I learn about more instincts, and Howard is going to talk about physical security. He's somewhere on here.
Oh,
There you are.
okay. Right. Kind of been a sudden stop there. I kind of slammed into the windshield. Sorry about that.
It's
Uh,
okay.
uh, we're just physical security is exactly what it sounds like. It is my body. You've done something that has affected my body. You punched me in the face, caused me to you broke my cheekbones, cost me all kinds of money to fix that. That affects my financial security as well. But the physical security is just simply that. It's my physical security. Security is about those three things, as Steve mentioned. It's about financial security, the pocketbook, the U.S. HIP Bank. You've done something that affected me financially, or you've done something that affects me physically. You hurt my body. And the third form of it is emotional security. Emotional security is just a general sense of well being. You did something that upset my sense of well being. You threw off the center of my being able to have some degree of peace in my life. You have affected my emotional security. You threw me off the axis. You can go.
All right. I like that. Um, so now we get to sex. So sex instinct, reproduction or pleasure. We all know we reproduce, we know it's feels good and satisfies us but can create a lot of problems, which means there's hurts involved. So sex relations is a relationship with sex. And I always say thinking or action, because it could be a resentment towards it. It could be fear towards it. It could be harm. You know, I learned that years ago. The more I did inventory, the more I realized there was a lot more stuff to it. But sexually, it's, physical and intimate sexual engagement between two people. And we all have sex relations and a sex drive. Animals do not have sex relations, they just reproduce. There is no choice in their partner, they just do their thing. But we all have free will and intelligence to make decisions based on sex, such as choosing our partners and the ability to choose, you know, what that ability to choose can cause many sex problems. So what now we're gonna add the misdirected, that's the instinctual part in there. What about the misdirected part, right? And you got to also throw that part for misdirected in there is, and we'll get more into this when we get to this to the sex conduct. But a lot of us grew up where at least I did within the church. They tell us this is a sin and this is bad and this is bad, but all these bad things about it, but never gave us any rules to follow that to have idealistic standards. So what happens if sex instinct gets misdirected? We over pursue it, or always. That can lead to anger, jealousy, revenge. We hurt others to get what we want. We get involved with the wrong people. We get stuck with the wrong people. We have it at the wrong time. We have it for the wrong reasons. We make choices that hurt others and ourselves. But most of all, one of the ugliest parts of it is we become dishonest, hiding sex relations from people we love. Infidelity, more harms. We betray trust, and that ends in guilt, shame, and regret that we have to look ourselves in the mirror with. We create false standards. We don't get what we want. We get revenge and retaliate, creating emotional trauma, maybe even physical abuse to people. But the end result is we're very discontent with our sex life, very discontent, which means we don't feel good about it. I don't, not satisfied with it. I'm going to move down to ambitions because we're getting towards the end, but might go over a little bit because we still got stuff to cover. So ambitions is, it's for success or achievement, our future goals, and goals, something we strive for. Any instinct when misdirected can change the course of events in seconds. I always like this analogy. Let's say Howard and I are going to business together. He lives in Florida. I live in California. And he says, just sell everything you got, come work for me. You're going to make, $10 million. Okay. I sell my house, have my wife quit her job, and get the moving truck. We're ready to load up. Howard called me and goes, "Hey, big change in plans. I can't hire you." All of a sudden, my ambitions are completely shattered, and that could change, the course of the direction of my life for years to come. Here's the questions, though. Let's go deeper. Has resentment ever changed the course of events? Has harm ever changed the course of events in life? Has fear ever steered you away from an ideal that you want to follow? What you want to be? Has pride ever alterated your potential relationship, or quit a job because you believe you need to make more money and you were wrong? Has losing a job ever left you feel depressed, frustrated? Has high self-esteem ever destroyed a long-term relationship or friendship, or low self-esteem? If you have ever left you with a lack of direction in your life? You know, the end result is that our plans, our goals, and our dreams, our ideals get changed because our social security and sex instincts become misdirected. Howard, do you want to comment on that?
Um, no, actually, ambition. I didn't know what that meant. I thought ambition is, gee, when I grow up, I want to be a fireman or I want to be an astronaut. And that's not what we're talking about at all. The simplest explanation I give people for ambition is the ability to accomplish tasks. For example, I want to go to a family wedding. I really want to go to that wedding, but I don't go because my cousin David's going to be there and I can't stand this son of a bitch. So I don't go to this wedding. My desire to attend the wedding, my plan, is interfered with because of my anger at my cousin David. He has interfered with my plans. I want to go in the grocery store. But I see Steve just went in the grocery store and I don't like Steve. So I go somewhere else. I go to CVS or I go to another store and do some shopping and come back to the grocery store. So my ability to accomplish the task of going grocery shopping was affected by my anger at Steve. He has interfered with my ambition, my ability to accomplish simple tasks. Ambition is very simple, but ambition is so important because when I finished my my fifth step, my sponsor said, "Gee, I had no idea what a power freak you were." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" Because in that column, every time you keep bringing up ambition as the main thing in your basic instincts that were affected, which means you didn't get your way. So you got angry. You didn't get your way. So you got afraid. You didn't get your way. So you acted out and hurt people. That's what ambition is about, not getting my way.
I just put the instincts thing in the chat. Um, at the bottom of that page, I took it down, but the bottom of the page it says instincts, you know, they are motivated by fear. And you think about how much fear is going to be all of this future process that we're going to be looking at. First, it's all our step four. It's a fearless moral inventory. We inventory our fears. The last column says frightened. And that's what instincts are bracketed next to Mr. Brown. But my thing is this is the best way I could put this together is what happens if I stay driven by misdirected instincts? Do you stay guided by the ego? And these seven pieces of self, those instincts, that we just looked at, make up our ego. That's the I. It's our identity, who we think we are, me, myself, and I. So if your misdirected instincts form who you are, that's the ego. And it's a false identity, meaning we're not who we really are. And ego makes me believe I am what I have, I am what I want, I am what I do, I am what other people think of me, I am better than others. So the ego lives in this insane duality, meaning it thrives on separation. I'm separated from everyone. I'm separated from God. And we're dominated by this ego. If I'm to keep living by instincts, I'm always going to be controlled by that. It wants to keep me locked up in its own little world. And so a lot of people will, even forgo this great spiritual process that we can do and stay stuck in that. This is about dissolving the ego to create a life that feels good inside, because we can't have two cores. This book says God is where? Deep down within me. At the beginning of this, I said, where are instincts deep down within me? And usually if the spirit's here, maybe the instincts are here, it's kind of like put an eclipse of the sun. But if ego will always, if I stay unaware, ego will always be who I am. So step forward is when we become aware of this stuff, and the ego fades. It always comes back and pokes its head out sometimes and stuff, but we can take a piece of paper out and look at it. That's the most beautiful thing, you know? And, I mean, so we can stay a host to God, or we can be a hostage of our instincts, you know? But I believe misdirected instincts is the cause of all our problems. But know this, the mind that creates that problem will never solve the problem. Meaning, you've heard this before, self-will can overcome self-will. Misdirected instincts cannot overcome misdirected instincts. I think we all know that. And we can stay fighting them, or we can do the action of 4 through 9. But the steps will align yourself, with that. I want to close with this, and it's kind of deep, but it ties it together. But in the rooms, you hear people always say, I got the isms. And I never liked that. When they say, they're referring to drinking. And my old friend Terry used to do a book study, passed away years ago. He says the isms are insufficient spiritual maturity. That's what the isms are, insufficient spiritual maturity. And here's the way he explained it. If I start drinking at 12 and at 39 I get clean, I have the emotional maturity of a 13-year-old. And using, drinking and not looking, and hiding the instinct within me, I self-medicate that. So with emotional maturity comes spiritual maturity. And that's simply knowing right. It's more than knowing right from wrong. It's knowing when I should do something, when I shouldn't do something. It's listening to your spirit within you. So spiritual maturity is the ability to listen to the voice within rather than the instincts. We never had spiritual maturity because we insisted on following our misdirected instincts rather than this voice. We heard it sometimes, but that voice is God consciousness. And we must achieve the awareness of God consciousness, because it is God conscious and only God consciousness that is capable of, I guess you could call it exceeding our animal instincts. So let's look within to find that. And that's what the big book calls the great reality. And it is then we find sufficient spiritual maturity, and we can grow. Right. And humans, a lot of them are controlled by instincts. One of the greatest truths I've ever heard is, what I'm aware of in life I can control, but what I'm not aware of will always control me. So the alternative to becoming aware, the alternative is to become aware of misdirected instincts so that they no longer have to control me. Now, if I'm not aware of them, they're going to control me. If I'm not aware of an infection in my body, I'm going to have an infection. Right? It's the same way. So, being totally unaware, they're driving my life, meaning you can have no clue they're controlling your life. We don't walk into A saying, I'm here to, is this a misdirected instincts anonymous? No. So, we have a choice. Be driven by instincts or be driven by God. And it sounds like simple, right? It does, right? Not as simple as it sounds, because sometimes the misdirected instincts is our comfort zone. We don't know anything other than that. Because this pain does not end when we stop drinking. We look around the meetings, right? So we must learn something new so we can have a life that's new. I'm gonna just read a quote by Walter Anderson. I'm gonna close this. He was a famous painter. He says, "Our lives only improve when we are willing to take chances, and the first and most difficult risk we can take is to become honest with ourselves." So it's just about getting honest with ourselves. I don't think we'll have a meeting next week because we're all going to be being thankful next Thursday at Thanksgiving, and I'll be hosting 60 people. Howard's got his hand up, I recognize. Sorry, Howard.
Yeah, and we're running late, and I just wanted to respond to something. Um, one or two people have reached out to me and asked me what I was talking about earlier when I said Jim Burwell was responsible for some of the language in that step. What did I mean by that? Well, originally the way Bill wrote the step was made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care and direction of God. Period. It was Jim Burwell who suggested the adding in of those other words. And he pointed out that this is what Bill Wilson was raised thinking anyway. And there was a little bit of a debate because there was the New York contingent led by Fitz Mayo who wanted more mention of God. And there was the other side of the coin, the New Yorkers, who didn't want any mention of God. They wanted a practical psychological approach. So Jim Burwell's suggestion of adding in the words that Bill always talked about anyway is what changed that. So that's what I meant when I said Jim Burwell was responsible for some of the language in that step. He just reminded Bill that as we understand him, or as you understood him, is what you were raised thinking anyway. And that's it. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks. Let me stop the recording.